Tata D here, Tata Danvers, two-time Olympian and Olympic bronze medalist, and you are watching or listening to another episode of Global Sports Channel's Sports Personality Spotlight. Today, I have a wonderful guest who's really all about athlete welfare. Well, you know what? I'll let him tell you himself, but I'll give you a little hint. Basketball. Okay, there you go. Welcome, Dillon Boucher. How are you, sir? Oh, I want
I'm
you on the other side.
fantastic.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
I'm terrible with names. Did I pronounce your name right?
Well, it's said Boucher, but
Boucher.
probably
Okay.
pronounced correctly, it's probably Boucher, to be honest, back in
Boucher.
my
Okay.
history and heritage.
I tried to add my own flair to it, but it's your name, so we gotta go with you. All
Sounds a
right,
lot
so
flashier the way you say it.
I love that. So tell us about you, for especially for those who there's a lot of people who do know you, but there are a couple out there who don't know your history. So where are you from and where are you calling from today? Are you at home?
Yeah, calling from home. I live in Auckland, New Zealand. Obviously basketball is the sport that I've been fortunate enough to play. Fully retired now from playing, obviously, looking at the grey hair coming through. But loved my time playing the sport and was fortunate enough to play on some great teams and obviously represent my country as well. So it's been a real fun ride.
Nice. So when did you begin your basketball journey? How did that all start for you?
Yeah, I guess it started in the backyard with my two older brothers. Really, I was a young fella, probably started when I was 8 or 9 years old, and we used to come home after school and play on our outside hoop on the gravel driveway. And my two older brothers used to beat me up and make me tough, and then I just fell in love with the game. I played all sports when I was young, but I really fell in love with basketball as I got older, and then when I realized I wanted to pursue it, I trained a lot harder and everything just kind of fell into place from there.
What was it about basketball that, drew you? Because like you said, what were some of the other sports that you played?
Yeah, I played everything: rugby, cricket, tennis, badminton, football, you name it. I was kind of sport billy when I was younger.
Right.
What made me fall in love with basketball was the skill level the basketball had. I felt like all the sports combined that I'd played, basketball was the one sport that you could use all of those skills that you'd learnt and be able to do it. But there's also kind of the era I really fell in love with is the era of the Michael Jordan era. And obviously, watching Michael Jordan and how graceful he was on the basketball court and wanting to be like Mike was kind of my thing when I was growing up. My game is nothing like Michael Jordan's, believe me, but it was certainly the inspiration going to it.
I love that. I was thinking about that as well. Like, when I was growing up, for example, I wanted to get into acting drama, but I looked around and I'm like, you know what? Didn't really seem like a thing for a black girl in London. It didn't just didn't seem from my little young mind like a career that I could really make a living from. Well, obviously I was wrong, but but for you, looking at NBA in America and the leagues in your country, were you thinking that this was something that you could actually do as a career, would you have to move to America to pursue it? What were your thoughts about actually having a career in this field that you could actually afford to do as a professional?
Yeah, to be honest, when I fell in love with the game, there was no real pathway in this country to make a career out of it. There was a national league that was like a semi-professional national league. Guys weren't paid a lot of money. I guess I fell in love with the sport for the right reasons because I loved the sport. And then as I got older, I realized that I could make a career out of this. And when I started training harder, I realized that there was a possibility that I could do this for a job. And obviously, like every young kid, I dreamed of being in the NBA one day, and that never came to fruition for me. But I certainly pushed as hard as I could to maximize my potential and what the output my body could get.
Right. How different is the NBL, which is what they have in your country, versus the NBA? Is it as popular, or is it, relatively speaking, is it as popular? What is that all like? Because I'm so curious.
Yeah, the sport is one of the largest, most played sports in New Zealand. So basketball
Wow.
itself is one of the biggest sports in the country, and it's every year it's growing. It's overtaking a lot of sports on its way. But that is a lot of that is driven by the NBA, and Stephen Adams being in the NBA and Sean Marks before him. Seeing New Zealanders in the NBA is what drives kids to want to aspire to be like them. But the sport popularity is really been driven by the associations and also the NBL, the Cells NBL, it's called in New Zealand here, and they also we have a New Zealand team, the New Zealand Breakers, that plays in the Australian NBL as well. So kids are seeing a lot of basketball on TV, being able to have local heroes that are doing it and that are full time professionals, and I really believe that's what gives kids the belief that they can take a similar pathway. And we're seeing more and more kids get scholarships to the US through various channels, and it's exciting for New Zealanders to be able to be selected for scholarships and go to the States and be able to get a 4-year education as well as upping their basketball skills at the same time.
Right. Having that key part of your career happening, like you said, a lot of kids are now able to get scholarships, even recognize that there is talent outside of America. For you, that journey kind of began around 17. You were selected, I believe, for your to compete for your country. What was that first experience like where you're like, hang on a minute, I'm really, really starting to do this and at high level?
Yeah, it was obviously a real honor. Anytime you get to pull on the black singlet for your country is something pretty special. And when I was selected for the New Zealand junior team, it was a pretty special moment. And unfortunately for us that year, we only toured Australia and we played against Australia, and they absolutely hammered us. So it was a great wake up call to how good the rest of the world was at basketball. So for me, it was made us come back and want to train harder because we'd been beaten so badly. And certainly that group of players, came back all with different aspirations to want to pursue their basketball because we saw how good players were around the world. And then a few years later, we got to go to a World Junior or 22 and under World Championships and play against the world's best. And although we did it slightly better than when we played Australia, we still probably didn't do as well as we would have liked. But that was kind of the cornerstone, I think, for myself and quite a few of the others on the team to be able to really want to knuckle down and train hard to be able to compete on the world stage.
Right. When that happens, do you find that your federation, the country, New Zealand, were they supportive? Because I know a lot of times when athletes or teams don't do well, all of a sudden they start cutting funding and trying to remove the sport. How was it for you?
Yeah, we had no funding at all to start with, so it was a complete
Right.
user pays journey. So they couldn't cut anything because it was ourselves paying for it. But
Wow.
one thing that happened was, basketball. We started to compete. We started getting invited or qualifying to go to world championships. So, basketball was taken a little lot more seriously in this country. And then in 2002, when I was playing on the national team, we were fortunate enough to come fourth in the world championships, which was kind of, I guess, put basketball on the map in this country. We sold out of basketballs in all the local sporting stores. Kids
Wow.
were, it was a real buzz around the country. And from that came funding from the government because we'd done so well. And from that became automatic qualifications to Olympics and things like that. So that was kind of a turning point for basketball in this country that, that there was a lot more kids watching that wanted to play basketball. There was a little bit more money behind it. And from there, the national team no longer had to pay to go on tours. It was now we were funded to go on those tours. So it was, it was a lot better than what it was when I was a New Zealand junior. That's for sure.
Right. Well, you were the trailblazer, legendary, paving the way for everyone who wanted to be involved in basketball after you. Now, I read that in 2000 you were working and you didn't get selected for the Olympic team, and at that moment you quit your job. Talk about that. Talk about some of the sacrifices that athletes such as yourself have to make in order to make the decision. Am I gonna be able to take this to the level? What do I have to give up to do that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, in 2000, you're right. So New Zealand had qualified for the Olympics automatically because Australia were hosting the Olympics and they had an automatic bid. So we were the top team in Oceania to go through. So we were lucky to have a team going through and went along to the trial like you do and felt like I'd trialed really well. Wasn't selected. There's some good players selected in front of me. So it wasn't like, there was any, cry for, the coach's head or
Justice.
anything like that. Yeah, I was just like, I didn't get selected, and first thing I did was think about why didn't I get selected and why didn't I make it? And did I do everything I needed to do to make it? And the answer was no. I didn't probably train as hard as I probably could have. I didn't put the time in probably necessary because I had other commitments, like I worked a full-time job.
Right.
I'd recently been married, so there was a whole lot of things there that were occupying my time. But I was felt like a dog with a bone, and I wanted to be able to make that national team, and I wanted to be able to go to an Olympic Games. And knowing that I had 4 years to try and prepare to try and make the team, I decided to make the move straight away. So I sat down with my wife, and said to her, I want to quit my job. And I was a travel agent at the time, and start my own coaching business so I can be bouncing a basketball 24 hours a day and really improve my skills and try and make the national team the following year. And that's exactly what I did. She supported me. I threw my job in. I had no income at all. I started going around schools and dropping flyers. In those days, it was faxing the school's flyers to say that I could do coaching at the school. And so basically, my day to day would be going around in schools coaching basketball. But what it meant is I had a basketball in my hand 24/7. So much to the fact that I started getting split fingertips, the tips of your fingers when you use rubber basketballs, it starts ripping your
Right.
skin apart. So I started having like skin condition on the end of my fingers because I was bouncing a ball so
Wow.
often. But what it did was it improved my skill set, and then thankfully, the next year I did make the team, although there was a coach change, and the coach had previous experience with me in the New Zealand junior team and the Auckland team, so he knew what I was able to provide. So, but those are the sacrifices, and I never went back to the travel industry after that. I pretty much stayed in my own coaching business until I became a full-time professional basketball player in 2003.
Wow. I mean, that is talk about hitting the pavement. Excuse me. Did it take a while to get up and running? Like, I'm sure that first flyer you put out, you're like, call me today, call me today. How long did it take to really get your business going?
Yeah, well, luckily there was no one really doing that out there, so it actually picked up really quickly, and it got so
Wow.
busy that I had to employ somebody else. So it got to the point where schools were crying out for it, and I ran holiday programs and things like that, and they're very, very popular these days. But back then, a lot of people weren't running holiday programs and so forth. So,
Right.
parents needed places for their kids to go, and I was a great, babysitting service, and as well as getting a basketball skills, so that the coaching clinics were very, very popular. Sold out all the coaching clinics, and was got so busy in coaching in schools that I had to employ somebody else to do the work with
Nice.
me and at other schools. So I guess I timed the market right, and I certainly, when I did it, it was a real gamble because I didn't realize it would probably take off as well as it did. But so I was quite fortunate in that respect.
It's fantastic. It's just following your passion, and it just basically it will come. It will come when you do. They
Mm.
say when you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Now you did through all your hard work. You went to Olympics. You went to the World Championships. You're nine-time NBL champion, four-time Australian NBL champion. Outside of blistering your fingers, what were some of the other things that you believe truly made you able to reach that level of success? Because I think when people watch sports and they see, you know, swimmers, 8 medals, and they see these achievements, and they almost think that oh well, they're talented, it must be easy for them. It's not easy. What were some of the things that allowed you to compete and perform at that level?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. One is, family support, my support network around me. I certainly grew up with parents that were very supportive, took me to everything that I needed to go to, paid for everything for me, and certainly, still to this day are my biggest fans. And then obviously my wife and children, allowing me to do what I do and chase my dreams. For my wife Nikki, she was able to hold things down in the family home and look after the kids when I would go away on long tours. We would go away for 7, 8 weeks at a time,
Wow.
on these long tours, and leave the kids behind. And a lot of the kids' childhood, I would be away on tours or playing away games. So there is a big family sacrifice there. I think without that support network, I wouldn't have been able to reach the levels I reached, and also wouldn't be able to have played for as long as I played. And like I say, I'm very grateful to my wife, Nikki, to allow me to keep playing for as long as I did, and supporting me, and being my number one fan at the same time. But I think, the other thing is just hard work. Like, I wasn't gifted with the natural ability as some people are. And I knew that from a young age. And I knew that if I was going to get anywhere, that, would be the stuff that your parents had drilled into you, that hard work, that will beat talent. So for me, it was just working harder than everybody else. When no one's watching, you're putting in the work in the backyard, shooting on your hoop, and when people are watching, you're working harder than everybody else. And for me, the game was as much a mental game as it was a physical game for me.
I need you to talk to my son, Jaden.
My son's got the same name, so there you go.
I saw that. I'm like, this guy's a very smart guy. But exactly. I'm always trying to tell him that it's not just doing what you're asked to do. It's doing more. It's being there early. It's staying late. It's that kind of stuff that really makes a true champion, which obviously you have done. Now, you basically, like I said, you're a trailblazer in your country with regards to basketball. You're legendary. Now that you've retired, you're also still creating a legacy in terms of what you're doing for your sport outside of actually just competing. So talk about the things that you're up to now. I know you're involved with the Huskies and many other projects.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have been involved with a lot of different things. And when I resigned as general manager of the New Zealand Breakers a couple of years ago, firstly, I was fortunate when I retired to go into a commercial role with the New Zealand Breakers, and then ended up being in the GM role, which was my dream job. And I did that for 3 years, and then it was time for change. So I kind of just decided that I wanted to stay involved with the sport, but do many things and try and help different organisations out. So yeah, you're right. So the Auckland Huskies, so I'm the director of basketball there, and that occupies some of my time. And our season's about to start in a couple of weeks, which is exciting. I also do some work with Stephen Adams' trust called Sports Pathways, which is about creating pathways for talented New Zealanders to be able to further their education and their sport, whether it be over on a scholarship in the US or in New Zealand, but being able to put the tools around them to be able to try and succeed in that. I do a little bit of work in the apparel game. So as you can see on my chest here, on this Pure Athletics, so do a bit of work with them, supplying school uniforms, sports teams uniforms, and things like that. Being able to try and create affordable solutions for schools to be able to, so the parents can save money and also have great service and great products. And then also I'm on the Global Sports Council as an advisor on that, to be able to try and pave the way, I guess, for all athletes and coaches all around the world, to be able to put a support network around them, to be able to have someone to turn to when things are not going as smoothly as they should be, and helping them transition from their sport back into the real world after they finish, and things like that. So got many different hats on that I really enjoy. I really enjoy my time, and staying involved in sport is something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I always feel that basketball in particular has been very good to me, and I want to make sure that I'm able to give back to the sport as well. So for me, that's my being involved in the sport, is me being able to give back and certainly help support a lot of players and coaches and teams along the way.
That is fantastic. That is a long list of hats you you wear there. Now, you mentioned transition and the struggle that athletes have. Were you ready for retirement? And maybe you were, but how did your experience with retirement, or even watching other players, other people that go through that transition, how has that affected your work and the way you do things now with trying to help athletes?
Yeah, it's for me. I was quite fortunate. Like I was playing on the New Zealand Breakers, and they allowed me to retire when I wanted to retire, and it worked in with me. It worked in with the club, and then after I retired, or while after I'd announced my retirement, I'd already arranged with them to go into the office, into a job, into a role
Right.
as corporate sales manager straight from playing. So I was one of the very fortunate ones that I already knew what I was going to do before I'd finished fully retired. But I can tell you, when I got into the office and kind of had a new appreciation for what was the work that was done in the office, and I felt like an imposter a lot of the time. I mean, I was 37 when I retired, 38, and so I was kind of like in an office, and I was kind of like I was an 18-year-old again, and I didn't know things, and I didn't even know where like the staplers or the staples were kept. I didn't know where, how to do photocopying. I didn't know how to do anything because I'd never done it before. So for me, it was just learning all of that again, and the the selling of the team was easy to me. That came second nature because it was a club that I loved and a club that I truly believed in. So when I was going out selling it, that was easy. But I certainly am one of the fortunate ones, and certainly from stepping down from my role at the Breakers, I've been fortunate enough to be approached by many different people with different opportunities. But certainly talking to other guys who have retired, there's a lot of mental health things that go on there because you go from being very, very important to all of a sudden now you're bottom of the pecking order again. So that's very hard mentally for people to deal with, and also financially. You go from earning a really good wage as a professional athlete in some cases, and then you go into maybe earning not even half of that as an employee. So it's really, really tough, that transition. And I know people out there will be saying, oh, poor athletes, they've earned millions of dollars. Well, no, the reality is most of us haven't earned millions of dollars. Most of us have earned not a lot playing. So the day I retired, I needed to start work the next week because I lived day to day paying my mortgage like everybody else. So I didn't just have 6 months to think about what I was going to do. And I think there's a lot of people in the same boat.
Absolutely. I know that I have heard, I don't know how true it is, that most athletes do live below the poverty line in terms of finances. And I think what's difficult for most athletes is the income isn't consistent. It's not like a job where every 2 weeks you get this check, you know exactly how it's going to be. So you can sort of plan out how everything's going to go. So, what advice, based on your experience and how well you were able to do it, looking back, if you were to put together sort of like a little booklet or something for athletes and saying, hey, listen, if you want to transition well, consider these things. What advice would you give to athletes trying to transition well out of their sports?
Yeah, I'm constantly giving this advice. And even when I was finishing my career, I was constantly giving this advice to younger players. And I was saying, build your profile while you're relevant and build your profile in the right way. So act appropriately, present yourself well, make sure your social media is wholesome and it's not going to have things that are going to come back to bite you. Make sure you don't do things in the media that are going to come back to bite you, because with Google these days, it's easy to look up any mistakes that anybody's made if you're a professional athlete. And if you've got a clean sheet, it makes it a lot easier for someone to be able to want to employ you. And the other thing is network while you're playing your sport. Meet people, be interested in other things, like get your education while you're playing. Be interested in other things outside of your sport. Don't just get consumed by your sport. Like, take an interest in other things, whether it be the share market or whether it be architecture or painting or whatever it may be. Just have other hobbies, because I think that will then broaden your skill set. So when you do finish playing, you have different areas to be able to go into. And I think those would be my advice. And the networking one for me was, it was something I did naturally, and I love talking, as you can probably tell. So I had no problem talking to sponsors and things like that after games. And, I was very fortunate when I was playing to have sponsorships because people liked me, not because of what I was able to do on the court, but what I would represent their brand well. And so that's what I would say to up and coming athletes is be someone that people want to sponsor and that would want you to be part of the organization when you finish playing.
Fantastic advice. I actually could have used could have used that advice. I mean, I got to the end of my 20-year career and I was like, how do I write a resume? Like you said, go to the office and you have no idea. How do I write a
No,
resume? What do I put on it? 20 years of, I didn't have a regular job. What am I supposed to put on it? And then, like you said, with the networking, that is so important because there's so many people I met along the way. I'm looking back, man, I could have really used being able to contact them now, but I was so focused, I didn't maintain relationships outside of really my coaching. So that is really great advice. Now you also do some work. What is better? Sorry, balance is better champion. What is that all about?
yeah, so I'm a Balance is Better champion. It's an initiative from Sport New Zealand. So there's a big issue at the moment in sport globally, not just in New Zealand, but we've got a lot of athletes that are being made to specialize in their sport at a young age because of the pressures of sport or the pressures the school has for the players to perform, or the pressures that parents are putting on children to be able to be the best in the world at what they do. So the Balance is Better is just making sure that kids have a balance in their life, whether it be a balance of their trainings or whether it be a balance of schoolwork, whether it be a balance of their social time, balance on their devices. So the Balance is Better is just saying that just make sure that everything in life is okay as long as you have a balance. And if you're doing too much of something, you're risking yourself breaking down. You're risking the fact that the child may not even like the sport by the time they get to 15 because they've been made to do it from 8 years old, and by the time they get to 15, they've had enough of the sport. So it's really just educating parents and athletes out there that you don't need to be specializing at a sport at 8 years old. You can play multiple sports and then go into one sport at a later age. And, being able to spread that message out there to people to just show that, a lot of the top athletes that you'll talk to have played multiple sports and they've got a skill set from those multiple sports they've played and they've taken it into their own sport. So really just trying to, I guess, be an ambassador for that in New Zealand and spread the word that not only to the athletes, but to the parents as well, that just make sure that your kids have got a balance in their life. And even adults, if your life's not balanced, at some stage you're going to break down or you're going to have something go wrong because you're too heavily one way. So life is all about balance, and this balance is better. That's exactly what that's about.
That's brilliant. I know that you did say at one point that the current culture with kids' sports is something that disturbs you. What do you think has been driving that culture with like you said, with parents just overzealous in terms of how they are working their kids through the sport?
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of parents are living vicariously through their children, and that's a worry. It's a worry that they're pushing these kids because that's what they wish someone had done to them when they were younger, and they don't realize, a lot of times your kids are programmed differently to adults. And I've experienced it with my own children. Like no matter, even though they're the same, maybe the same gene pool or half of your gene pool, they're all different, and everybody is very different. So pushing kids into sport and into trainings at a young age is detrimental for them, and I think it causes competitiveness between not only their teammates but also their friends, and then the parents are possibly causing trouble with coaches saying, "Why is my child not playing more?" It's I think it's getting very ugly in sport, and I want to be really outspoken about it. And I've experienced it as a coach myself. Having parents come and interfere and a coach and with the coach and how much minutes their child should be playing and things like that. So it's a really tough one. I take my hat off to all the coaches out there because they have a lot of people coming at them from different angles and different motivations and questioning their decision making on playing time and things like that. And it's not easy, and especially when you're doing it in a volunteer role, you shouldn't have any parents coming up to you questioning your why of why you're subbing a kid in and out, or why a kid's playing more. Because end of the day, every coach thinks differently, and you might have put the same 10 players out there and put 5 different coaches, and every coach will see a different light in every player, and so may think another one player is better than another player. So for me, it's about just making sure that you let your child play sport because they love it. Kids start sport because they love it, and they fall in love with the sport because they love it. And if you take that love away from the sport, they're going to end up giving up the sport. Whereas what we're trying to encourage is we're trying to encourage kids to keep playing sport right up until their adult years. And yep, some will go on to be high performing athletes, but the majority won't. And that's what I want parents to understand. Like, let your kids enjoy it first, and let them see if they do want to pursue and want to put that extra time in. And they'll tell you whether they want to do it or not. You don't need to tell them that they need to train more.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, just I think when I look at it and seeing the influence that television has and how television has influenced the dollars or pounds or whatever currency you use in sport, I think it's really, like you said, pushed a lot of parents to start seeing this as a business, and now they're making the kid almost like an employee before they've even
Mm.
grown up. I mean, you watch parents like the Williams sisters in tennis, their father Tiger Woods' father. So it sort of almost became something fantastic to just drive your kids. But like you said, every kid is different. And I've seen parents who will do what those parents did, and their kids, like you said, by the time they get to the point where now it would be a career, they're not interested anymore. They want nothing more to do with the sport. So I completely agree.
That's right.
Balance
For
is
every
better.
success, there's probably balance is better. For every success, there's a million failures, and that's what we don't see. Those ones aren't documented, and they're starting to document those more and more about failures in sport. And I think it's really important to understand. We glorify, like you say, the Williams sisters and Tiger Woods, and just so happens that their athletic makeup mixed with incredible amount of training made them the world's best. Not everyone is made up physically like the Williams sisters or Tiger Woods. So even if they trained the same amount, would they have had the same outcome? No, the answer is no. So, like there's so many stories, of failures behind that, of people that have kids that have given up sport because they've been pushed too hard by their parents, and or ended up even worse, the child ends up hating their parents and having no relationship with them, all because of sport, which is the worst possible outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you are obviously very driven, both on and off the court. So, there's so much that you're involved with, there's so much that you're doing. If you fulfill your life's mission, what will have been accomplished when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my life's mission, I mean, I'm passionate about basketball. I would love to see basketball in New Zealand be the number one sport, and love to see, us producing more and more athletes globally, and seeing more numbers playing the sport, and enjoying playing the sport. But, I would love to see all sports, being able to improve their sideline behavior, those sorts of things. Parents being able to just enjoy their kids' sport and encourage them rather than trying to coach them in the car on the way home. And it's something I was, had to pull myself back a lot of the times in those car rides home from games or trainings, where you're trying to tell your child what they should have done better rather than just patting them on the back and telling them they've done well. And it's a hard thing to do, and especially if it's in a sport that you've played or you've done, because you feel like you have a level of expertise that you want to share with them. And I
Yeah,
guess that's just a way of being able to share it. So, I'd just love to see, parents just relaxing a little bit more on the sidelines and just enjoying the fun side of sport again. That would make me happy.
fantastic. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, Dylan. If people want to support the mission that you are on, if people want to know how to get in touch with you or follow you or any of the organizations that you work with, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with athletes and the Global Sports Council, we're on Facebook. Um, but I'm also on social media as well. So I'm easy to find on social media. If you just type my name in, it'll pop up. But yeah, more than willing to help anyone out there that wants advice, or wants to be steered in the right direction. And that's our mission, is to try and help as many athletes around the world as we can.
Fantastic. So, what's coming up for you? Anything coming up for you in the next couple of months or so?
Yeah, obviously got a season kicking off in a couple of weeks for the Huskies, so that's exciting. I'm actually just spending the weekend watching my daughter play in the National Touch Championship.
Wow.
So putting my dad hat on, and making sure my behaviour is good on the sideline and supporting her all the way.
Being the example, being the change
Yeah,
you want to see, Dylan.
that's right.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'll let you get back to your family and probably the long to-do list of things you have to do today. Please, we'd love to have you back on the show at some point in the future. But thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on, and letting me share my story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye. Wise man. Wise man. And, he did it and he did it well. Speaking of his career and especially the evolution, like to find someone that really transitioned out of their sport in such a balanced way, in such a good way, is not common. So if you're an athlete, or even if you're in another industry and you're trying to move on, like some of those tips that he gave about being prepared, or looking into other things, not just focusing solely on one thing, so that when it's time to move on, you have other skill sets and other strengths. That is so important. So I'm really glad he was able to join us today. Follow him, see what he's got going on, because he is doing amazing things for not only the sports community, but the community in general. So, parents, take his advice now. Don't put all that pressure on your kids. They're going to be amazing. All right, no matter what. So, anyway, don't forget to like, share, follow, because we are on a movement right now to really help athletes improve their lives both before, during, and after sports. Go to www.globalsportschannel.com and www.loveathletes.com. And you know what? I guess that's all from me, folks. See you next time.